Sighting number 176390 from the National UFO Reporting Center. An entity resembling a grey alien was in my home and left my daughter's room, then came in my room and sedated me. I woke 4 minutes later to see an orb outside. I was recovering from a surgery 30 days post-operative. I was still in a lot of pain. Medication consisted of 5 mg of diazepam, 37.5 mg of Tramoset, 2 to 3 times per day. Conservative doses taken at 9:30 p.m. This only allowed me some freedom from pain, but I am conscious of the dangers of overuse of medication, so I was concentrating on keeping low dosages. At 3:22 a.m, I was awakened by a movement in my bedroom. My wife was sleeping with our daughter across the hall, and she did not want to disturb me in my recovery, and had been doing so since I was recovering from the surgery precisely 1 month prior. When I awoke, I looked at my clock as I habitually do. I am often awakened between 3 and 4 a.m. by what I assume is activity from the train yard. This night I was somewhat surprised to see, what I thought was my wife at first at the doorway to our room. The figure walked into the room, though the door seemed to stay only open a crack as I always leave it. It was semi-dark and hard to make out, and as the figure moved around my room, it first walked alongside the bed, the opposite side I was sleeping and opposite the window. It turned around and then walked toward the window. I struggled to say something. What the fuck was my thoughts, but I was unable to speak. As I noticed, it did not match my wife's appearance. My wife is small and petite. I noticed the outline was grossly thin and there was exaggerated limbs and hands and head in proportion to the body. Though the head was smaller than typically depicted in popular culture, the limbs looked incapable of supporting any weight. They appeared about 1 inch in diameter. It appeared to be roughly the outline of a typical grey alien, though in the dim light it appeared to be clothed in all black. I was deeply concerned and somewhat in fear. I struggled violently, but was unable to move. It was like I was frozen stiff. As the figure reached the window, it turned and looked at me. I could make out its left hand, which was raised. At this point I passed out, very reminiscent of when the surgeon gave me anaesthetic in my surgery. I could see my bedroom clock, which I keep across the room as I have read they can cause sleep disruptions. As the figure moved past, it was still 3:22 a.m. I passed out unwillingly and quickly. I was attempting to fight and stay awake. I awoke again at 3:24 a.m, and I could see my bedroom curtains and blinds silhouetted by a very bright light from outside. I painfully got out of bed and limped to the window. I threw open the curtains and then turned the blinds, and was amazed and confused by what I saw. There was an incredibly bright and purely clean white round object outside, and slightly to the right and 5 feet above my window. The corona seemed to have some element of white shades, and perhaps a yellow tint as it radiated outward. Behaviour of the object. Glowing white orb. Pulsated and grew and shrunk exponentially, radiating an intense bright light. Grew from 3 feet to 8 feet approximately in diameter. Repeatedly shrank and grew at a rate of about full cycle of every 10 seconds, then would shrink again and repeat. I witnessed this from 3:24 to 3:27 or 3:28 a.m. I even seemed to be hypnotised by it. The light did not disable my night vision, as a light normally would. I was still able to see and discern objects around my backyard. This happened outside my second floor window, and was approximately 5 to 10 feet above my window. I was also able to make out street lights nearby, and discern objects in the train yard, seeing the lights from the bridge across the train yard. I was seriously confused and distraught by what I was seeing. It made no sense to me. I seemed to hear a voice in my head that was likely my own. This is not going away. You should go to sleep and forget about it. So, I listened to this advice and went to sleep deeply disturbed and feeling very confused and afraid. I remember thinking, if you come back, I must hurt you to protect my family. I will hurt you if you come back. I will smash your skull. I also thought, I must think angry and violent thoughts to keep these things away from our kids. No sound was heard from the craft or object. There was a sound of the movement when the figure moved about the bedroom. I could hear the feet on the floor kind of shuffling. The weather was fairly clear and somewhat misty with high humidity, which is standard in the lower mainland area. I don't believe it was raining, but we often have very low clouds and fog with light mist in the air, very high humidity. I lost sight of the object as I closed my curtains in total fear, and averted my gaze in confusion and moral degradation. I felt like I'd just been humiliated or something, like I lost a fight or was too chicken to stand up for myself. I fell into a deep sleep for the rest of the morning. I slept much later than usual. When I awoke, I thought about what I saw immediately. I have no doubt I was not dreaming. None. I asked my wife somewhat tentatively if she went into our room and was by the window. She said absolutely not, and I asked her several times, to which she was annoyed by my questions. I told her of this a few weeks later. She believes it was an angel or spiritual being. She's a very practicing Catholic, though I am quite moderate. As a side note, she is related to the actual Catholic Monsignor from her province in the Philippines, who is actually a documented and appointed exorcist to the church in her home province. He baptized me when we married in the Philippines. I only bring these secondary points up to be thorough, and hope this does not confuse the incident in question. I still wake up at night and think as I get out of bed, if you're in my home, I will attack and hurt you. I often say it out loud as I am too afraid to leave my bed to urinate. Nearly 6 months has passed since this incident. I still wake up and prepare myself for violence often, though nothing has happened since that I'm aware of. I've been speaking to 2 counsellors and have told approximately 5 people of my experience. No one has expressed much interest, except my cousin, who is a UFO buff, though he has never personally witnessed one. My PTSD counsellor says he has heard multiple reports from clients. He also works with military personnel, and says these reports are more common than most people understand. My daughter, who is handicapped and non-verbal, speaks with a handheld device. She frequently comes to my room at night since the experience and closes my curtains and blinds. She's quite obsessive with this and never did this prior to the event. This has continued for 5 months. She also expresses concern to her mum and frequently states with her device, "Dad's sad, Dad tired, Dad sleep." This is also a new speech pattern since the incident. She is 12 but has the intellect of a 4 to 5-year-old, but is highly observant and thoughtful, as well as overly empathetic. She seems to not recall or be willing to communicate with me about the night 2 years later. I believe what I saw was not a hallucination or a dream. 5 months later, on June the 19th, 2021, later I awoke with a triangle-shaped piece of flesh missing from my ankle and extreme numbness in my foot for days afterwards. My wife said I never left our room. She was sleeping on the couch. I slept 16 hours and had a bad headache. Quite a painful wound. It was very unique and hard to describe. The wound would seem to buzz while using my electric car for days afterwards. It was like my foot was asleep, tingling but painful. I have photos of the flesh wound. I sold my home shortly afterwards and moved 4 kilometers away. My neighbours claim to have never noticed anything in the evening then or since when I asked them if they ever saw lights or aircraft or anything of the sort in the evening. I must say though, I still worry a bit, but I do not believe I have been visited since. Sighting number 177595. Alien encounter. East Vancouver. I lived alone. No one was in the apartment with me. I lived in an older apartment building in the lower commercial drive area but 1 street over. I do not remember the street name. It was in the afternoon and I laid on top of my bed for a nap with no blanket over me. After 5 minutes and still awake, I noticed about 4 alien beings coming in through my front door and coming into my bedroom. My front door was close to my bedroom. My thoughts said loudly in my mind, "Oh shit, they're here." In hindsight, I don't know why I thought that in the way that I did. It was a foreign thought, and as if I knew them or something along those lines. They were immediately around the left side of the bed that I was laying on. I remember not being able to move, and my vision got fuzzy quickly as if I was looking through water or wavy vision. I think that there were 2 or 3 of them lined up beside me, and they lifted me somehow, but not my body. It was like the hood of a car. I was fighting my fading vision as I looked at what they were doing. Within seconds, I passed out. When I woke up, I remembered everything, and I laid there just trying to absorb what had just taken place. I did not know why it had happened to me. I then felt a pricking sensation, and looking at my body, saw massive scratches all over my chest and left arm. I don't remember if I was injured on my right arm. The razor-like scratches were burning, and on a scale of 1 to 5 of burn intensity, they were about 1. My upper chest was cut up, but I do not remember if there was any injuries on my breasts. I do not think there were. As the day wore on, I became worried that if I were to get an infection, what the hell would it even be like? Would I die because the infectious disease would be unknown? Well, I started to get scared. I phoned Dr. Farmer at his clinic in his office in the Oak Ridge Mall. I asked for an emergency appointment and he saw me quickly. I think that it was within a day. I did not tell him what it was about. I think that I said that it was unusual and I needed him to see something right away. When I was in his examination room, I admitted that this is going to be a strange appointment and that I know that he's not going to be able to do anything. I told him that I just needed this to be reported on my medical records. I then opened my shirt to expose my cut-up chest, I rolled my sleeves to expose my arms, to which he empathetically and immediately said, "Oh, you've injured yourself." "No, doctor," I said. "I just woke up in this state. I know this is strange, but I do not know what else to do but to report in, and I want this in my medical records." He asked if he could take a closer look and pulled over a larger overhead magnifying lens, and as he examined the cut in my arm, it closed. He gasped when he noticed that there were no loose skin edges to be found. He gasped, saying something about the magnitude of what he saw. When he stopped looking, I emphasized to him that the razor-like cut on my arm started at the shoulder and followed a miraculously straight line right down to my wrist. Dr. Farmer appeared stunned. I got up and told him to make sure that this would be in my medical records in case I get sick from this attack. I then left his office while he was staring at me speechless. Lastly, I must say that I bruise and scar easily, but these razor-like marks all healed in about a week and left no scars or marks of any kind. Sighting number 176566. A short creature with big black shiny eyes ran from my shed, back behind my car, and then green lights flashed, and it was gone. My wife and I were sitting on our back patio on the evening of July the 2nd, 2023. As we were sitting and talking casually amongst ourselves, at around 9:45, the motion light on our backyard shed turned on. It immediately caught my attention, as it's roughly 30 to 35 feet from where we were sitting. My wife's car is parked a couple of feet in front of the shed where the light shines off the front left side. At first I didn't really think too much of it, but I continued watching for just a moment. Then very quickly, I saw a very short being run from behind the shed out past a gap and behind the car from our perspective. Its skin colour was a very tan looking. It was barely taller than the hood of the car, which is a small sedan, so it was roughly about 3 to 3.5 feet in height. Its body was small and slender, and its head was bigger and more rounded. Its eyes were huge and took up most of its facial space. The eyes were black and very shiny. I could see 2 eyes looking towards me as it ran by, like it knew we were just sitting there. I felt as if we made eye contact as it ran by, and I was genuinely left speechless for a moment. Immediately after it ran behind the car, there was a flash of green light, what seemed like barely 15 to 20 feet in the air. And, well, that was it. It vanished into thin air. We never saw anything else and were honestly so freaked out we came back inside. After initially seeing the being's eyes and the feeling that I saw them so clearly, I felt like I'd made eye contact with it. I had an overwhelming feeling of emotions and my eyes didn't stop watering for a while. We couldn't talk about anything else the rest of the night. Every time I even thought about the instance, I got instant chills and still felt like I could see them so clearly in my memory. This is a first-time encounter for my wife and I, and we really felt like it needed to be reported somewhere. Thank you for taking the time to read. Sighting number 178700. Alien-like figures in my flat. I woke up after having a weird dream about genetic changes in the future, and suddenly I woke up because I felt like I was being watched, and I felt this presence in my room. I raised my hand and I saw 2 creatures staring at me, and it was something like transparent energy fields, but I could still see coloured sparks of light emanating from the edges of their shape, and they were like really tall people. They couldn't stand straight in my room. They slowly started moving backwards, and after a few seconds, I heard gentle knocks on my glass door to the garden. Needless to say, I was totally terrified, started shaking. I didn't want to leave my bed because I was scared they might be in my living room. I eventually stand up and looked outside, but I couldn't see any craft or anyone in particular. I've never had any situations like that before. I'd once seen a UFO before, an orb of a golden light type appearance doing high manoeuvre zigzags very fast once in Poland over the power plant in 2010, and later saw one in Worthingtown, West Sussex, UK in 2012. It was a bright orange disc light, and it headed towards west, suddenly disappearing at a very high speed. Sighting number 177654. Spacecraft with an alien being standing on top of it. My sister, 17, and I, 14, went outside and stopped short when we saw a figure standing on top of a spacecraft. It was staring at us as it hovered across the street on our cul-de-sac. It appeared human, but with arms outstretched, as if holding onto ropes, but there was nothing. It was beige, salmon-coloured, and had two black-shaped eyes but no other distinctions. It stood staring at us, which seemed forever, but I'm sure it was about 10 to 12 seconds. It then came forward and zoomed across Puente Avenue, disappearing into thin air. There was no trail or trace left. Equally as strange, we weren't actually scared. We never told our parents or anyone else until we got into our 20s.